and much, much more.
But first, here are the latest headlines with Tatiana.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Sir Salman Rushdie's agent says the author is on a ventilator and may lose an eye after he was attacked on stage during an event in New York yesterday. The 75-year-old was appearing at a literary festival when he was repeatedly stabbed in the neck and abdomen. He's faced several death threats from the Islamists since the 1989 publication of his book, The Satanic Verses. New York State Police have named the suspect as 24-year-old Hadi Matar. He remains in custody. While speaking to GB News, the former US Trade Representative Steve Gill claimed security provided at the event was inadequate.
We're learning from the investigators that there had been requests for more security for him, and the institution had decided not to do that because they didn't want a barrier between the attendees and the speakers, the guests. They thought that would kind of chill the whole approach of free speech that they were promoting.
Rail passengers face further disruption as drivers at 9 train companies walk out over pay and conditions. West Coast Services, LNER, London Overground and South Eastern are affected. Some parts of the country will have no services at all. Meanwhile, the Post Office says they'll stage fresh strikes for 3 days at the end of August. The Communication Workers Union has announced staff will walk out on the 26th, 27th and 30th in an escalating dispute over pay. New court documents show the FBI has seized several top-secret files during a search at Donald Trump's estate in Florida. A federal judge approved a warrant to carry out a search at the former president's Mar-a-Lago property. It's after the US government said it's possible he had violated the Espionage Act, a law that prohibits passing on or keeping national defense information. Mr. Trump has denied any wrongdoing and said the items were declassified. The Wealth Secretary has become the first cabinet minister to publicly switch sides in the Tory leadership race, putting his support behind Liz Truss. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Sir Robert Buckland says he believed the Foreign Secretary's economic policy would help the country through the current cost of living crisis. Sir Robert described Truss as the right person to lead the country forward. The Environment Agency says drought conditions could last until next year. It's after more extreme heat is expected in the south of England this weekend, while the north is set to be struck by thunderstorms and floods. Amber weather warnings have been issued. Further water companies could also enforce stricter measures to conserve supplies, with Yorkshire Water becoming the latest to introduce a hosepipe ban. Dr. Simon Boxall is a senior lecturer of oceanography at the University of Southampton, and he told GB News that we should plan for the future so this doesn't happen again.
Compare us now to 1976, when we had the last big drought. We're much better prepared than we used to be. But you have got what is tragically a sort of a series of events which has brought this very, very dry weather. And I think we do need to think about this in the future because we are going to see more of these droughts.
Record numbers of people are getting checked for bowel cancer following the death of Dame Deborah James. The NHS says, thanks to her campaigning, people are taking the illness seriously and speaking to their GPs about it. Well, figures show over 170,000 people went for checks between May and July. Dame Deborah, known as Bowel Babe, died from the disease at the end of June, aged just 40. And US actress Anne Heche has died following a car crash last week. A warning: the following contains flashing images. The actress is known for films such as Volcano, Donnie Brasco and the 1998 remake of Psycho. According to her representative, she currently remains on life support to see if she's a potential match for organ donation. However, she's considered to be legally dead under California law after suffering severe brain damage. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with me, Esther, and him, Philip. We have an exciting show lined up for you today.
We'll be playing an exclusive interview recorded this week with the Minister of State for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
We'll also be joined by best-selling author Sandra Howard and mental health expert Gillian Bridge to discuss why we have a love affair with our own feelings.
And as ever, we want to hear from you today, so if you want to get involved in the show, please email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
But before all of that, we're delighted to say that we're joined in the studio by the man who's been described as one of the most important Conservative activists of the past 20 years. That's Tim Montgomery. Delighted for you to be here, and you're going to be with us throughout the entire show talking through this Jacob Rees-Mogg interview. But what's caught your eye in the papers today? We'll have a quick sort of roundup of some of the stories in the papers.
Well, on my train journey in, where I had a carriage almost to myself...
And you managed to get it.
I managed to get in. I think my train journey, I think, was a little bit easier than your Tuesday.
Yes,
journey.
Standing all the way.
Yeah, well, I had luxury I had this morning, and it was all on time as well. So, but, of course, we're here working, at least, and there's a page 2 of The Sun today, which sort of reflecting on what has been a bit of a controversy this week, with Gordon Brown's intervention saying, you know, where are the government? Are they all on holiday? Why aren't they doing anything? And the Sun is noted that, I can quote, that Keir Starmer was seen tucking into tapas and enjoying wine, of all things. And this is sort of tricky. Of course, the charge is hypocrisy, which is fair enough. Labour saying, you know, the Tories are on holiday and then being on holiday themselves. But we all need rest. And, of course, the other thing is you can be in Mallorca or wherever and still be completely in touch these days. You know, that is the problem, really, with modern life, is you can never switch off because we're always there with our not BlackBerries anymore, our iPhones and our mobiles and our iPads and all the rest.
It's what it's looked like, though, isn't it? It's not the reality, really. It's just the image, isn't it? Yeah. That's the thing that...
Except for they all seem to be away at the same time, and that was also a lack of coordination. So Boris was away, our Chancellor was away, Keir was away, and everybody at home's thinking cost of living, how can we pay our bills? So I think the whole thing, was mismanaged. Yeah. I think it was poorly coordinated. So I'm on the side of that. And I'm just shocked that Gordon Brown had to intervene to give Labour its policies.
Absolutely,
where was he? So I think there's a lot
Does
going
it also
wrong.
show that these people don't understand about a cost of living crisis? They're off on holiday.
Maybe that's part of what people feel angry again.
Well,
I did like... I know we're talking about today's papers, not the week's papers, but I did like the headline in the Metro this week with the PM attends a meeting on the front page splash, which is a bit mean, but it will have captured how a lot of people thought about it.
This one is another story. This just made me smile, and I think we need things to smile about, don't we? This was in the Times, page, 37. Robbers call police for help when their tunnel collapses. The most hapless robbers ever. They decide to rent a shop, which is obviously close to the bank, dig a tunnel and get into the bank that way, and they didn't do it right. Very porous land. It collapses. But it also says that neighbours had heard the drilling for some days. So if they hadn't called the police, the neighbours would have to say something mightily suspicious is going on there.
What did the police say? Did they say, unless you've misgendered somebody, we're not coming out? No, it's just a robbery. We're not interested in those. You know?
Yeah. They said, well, no, maybe they just said we're self-identifying as robbers. Yes. So will you come out and help us? But it did see the fire service were there, and they did take some time. It seems to have gone from Thursday to Friday, so maybe they got their own back by letting them stay really in the heat underground.
Given that no one was hurt at the end of it.
Now, the story I like this today, page 39 of the Daily Mail, love is telling your partner what an awful day you've had. So it says, when you get a parking ticket or have an argument at work, you'll probably tell your partner about it over dinner, but rather than just being a useful way to blow off steam, moaning to your significant other about a bad day can bring you both closer. Now, it should have said afterwards, unless you're married to Esther McVeigh, because you get no sympathy at all when you complain to Esther that you've had a bad day. It's like, you know, I don't want to hear you moaning. I don't want to hear you moaning on all day about what your day you've had. So you're right. I had a terrible train journey yesterday. Any sympathy?
Hang on.
Esther was on this same journey as well.
She managed to sneak herself a seat.
Thank you very much indeed. I didn't need to hear his moaning because you know what? Inside, I was seething as well. So to have it layered on top with his sort of misery, I did not need that, you see. I thought there was a time for holding that misery in, Philip. We were sharing it.
She'd found a seat on the luggage rack.
I thought I was booked as a guest here, and I'm beginning to wonder whether I need to be sort of counsellor.
Exactly.
Well, I think you do. And that's why you're here for the next 2 hours. It's our cheapest marriage counsellor that we ever had. In fact, we're going to look at somebody else's marriage and life and work. So now it's 2.
Anyway, on to our exclusive interview with the Minister of State for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes, during the course of the show, you will hear the interview in full in which we ask him about his relationship with Boris Johnson, working from home, Brexit and, of course, the leadership race.
But we started proceedings by asking him why he embarked on a career in politics.
Jacob, you had a very famous father, long-standing editor of The Times, and I wondered, did you never want to follow him down the journalism route? Were you always destined to be a politician?
Well, I never thought I was good enough at journalism, certainly not compared to my father, who was a brilliant and natural writer. And I've done a bit of writing, but I didn't think I was of his standard, and therefore it was better to pursue another career.
So you didn't want to be compared in a way?
My father was an enormously successful journalist, and to be compared to him would, from my point of view, always been very flattering. But no, I was attracted by doing something different.
But why politics?
Well, I could ask you the same, but particularly from your journalistic background and both your successful business career, successful journalistic career. What is the great draw of politics? Well, it's mixed things, isn't it? That there is an element of public service, that it is important to contribute to the society in which one's involved, but it's also compellingly interesting that you're involved in national events, you have a ringside seat at national events, sometimes you're directly involved with them, and it's very rewarding intellectually that you're dealing with interesting problems. So I think there are lots of reasons for wanting to be involved in politics.
So do you think your religious beliefs shape any of your political policies?
The question of religion and politics is a fascinating one, and the extent to which they interrelate and the extent to which they don't. Now, of course, most political decisions, most political issues, manifestos and so on, don't have a clearly religious element to them, do they? They are essentially secular. But I think the idea of public service is one that is certainly underpinned by religious belief and the value of everybody. I mean, lots of people think that you can't be a Christian and a Tory, that you have to be a socialist. And I've always thought that's absolute nonsense, because Christianity teaches very clearly that every individual is valuable, regardless of background. And the parable of the Good Samaritan is very important in this, that a reminder that however different people are, they are still loved by God, valuable individuals. And I think a political creed that is based on the individual is one that is very sympathetic to Christianity.
So when you saw people like the Archbishop of Glasgow come out and say the Rwanda policy for immigrants was morally wrong, did that cause you a bit of sort of inner tension, inner concern?
No, because I think there's very good medieval theology on this, when the papacy made great claims to have secular power as well as spiritual power. And there is a pope who in 1304, I think it is, puts out a papal bull, Unum Sanctum, claiming that all secular authority is subject to the church. And they base it on the doctrine of the two swords, that in St. Luke's Gospel, Christ is told there are two swords, that one is enough. And the argument was that the secular sword was delegated to the secular authorities and both belonged to the religious authorities. Now, this simply turned out not to be the case. And it became clearly established that the secular authority had the right of operating in its sphere. Render unto Caesar what is to Caesar, render unto God what is to God. And the highly elaborate claims by the papacy to have control over the secular world were debunked, for want of a better term. So I think morality is with the church, the teaching around the Gospels and matters of faith and morals. But day-to-day political decision-making is for the politicians, and that Rwanda is a political decision, not a moral one. And the lessons we've had on morality from various church figures have, to my mind, not actually understood the policy, so they haven't been relevant to the fundamental policy.
But you never took it personally.
No, right, certainly not. If I have responsibility to a bishop, it's to the Bishop of Clifton, who is the bishop in Somerset, who I always listen to very carefully. The Archbishop of Glasgow is not in any direct line a spiritual authority to people living in Somerset.
And how does your family view you as a sort of a famous and much sort of watched politician? How do they cope?
Well, a bit of a mix, inevitably, that I think my children enjoy it most of the time. They get a bit fed up with me when they can't get a word in edgeways because I'm talking to other people. And I once went to the Royal Bath and West show, and one of my children said to me, "Daddy, the next time I come with you to anything like this, you must come in disguise," because he got so fed up with me speaking to people. But it was about...
I don't think you'd be easily disguised, to be fair. And your children, who look a lot like you, would all have to come in disguise as well.
But it was about 3 weeks before the Brexit referendum. So that sort of explained why people wanted to have a conversation. And then they see that actually it's quite interesting.
And you've got to share a lot of time around your 6 children as well, so they've got to share it out between them. How about Peter? Is he going to follow in your footsteps and become an MP?
I don't know. I mean, his great passion at the moment is cricket.
Quite right too.
Quite right too. But my daughter Mary is getting increasingly interested in politics. She came with me earlier this week to Bristol, where I was doing one of the events for Liz Truss. We were debating against Mark Harper. And Mary came along and found it absolutely fascinating. So there may be some competition in the Rees-Mogg household for who is going to be the political figure after me.
And maybe female leaders draw on a female audience as well, like Margaret Thatcher did.
Well, for some reaction to the first part of our interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, we're still joined in the studio by Tim Montgomery. Tim, I mean, Jacob's the kind of person who went into politics for all the right reasons, isn't he? He is. You get that from that, don't you?
Yeah, and I'm a fellow Christian, and I like the fact that we have those people who have some sort of different standard which they're measuring their politics. You know, some measure that with Ayn Rand or a political philosopher. But I've the brave positions that Jacob Rees-Mogg has taken. I remember he interviewed once on Good Morning Britain, and he talked about his opposition to abortion, his opposition to gay marriage. I agree with him on abortion, don't agree with him on gay marriage. But he says what he thinks. And I think that's something that a lot of people look for in politics. Even when you disagree with people, a lot of people feel that the modern politician is constantly weighing their words, they're wanting to say what you want to hear. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are turned off with politics. I disagree with Jacob Rees-Mogg on lots of things, but I always know you're hearing what he really believes. And that's refreshing.
And it's more than just belief. And I think people are looking for a more solid rationale for your reasoning. You know, he is well-read, or as you say, he will go to the scriptures in one way or another. And I think that's what people are looking for, that certainty, that strength in conviction, but it has to have come from knowledge, which I think he's got. I think most people like that. What I was intrigued by when I said, would you have gone into sort of journalism? Oh, I didn't want to be compared with my father. And then I thought, I wonder if his 6 children are thinking that. So he's got Peter, we said, is he going to go into politics? And he said Mary. But I think that comparison with a famous father, irrespective of a background, is difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is, yeah. And how old are Peter and Mary? What are they, sort of teenagers? Or I don't
yes, they are.
Yes, they will be, yeah. Peter will be, yeah.
They're all taller than us, I know that much.
Genes. In a previous job, I was at the Times. I was comment editor there for a little while. And, William Rees-Mogg is previous editor of the newspaper. He is a huge figure in journalism. And of course, I think he was quite involved in the establishment of, the modern reputation of the Times is still, a great...
And he was editor from 67 to, I think it was 81. It was a huge period of time. That's every day doing a newspaper. And I think he said he didn't really have, therefore, much time with his father because he was always doing this tomb of a work.
I mean, do you think that? Do you think it's difficult to follow in your father's foot? I mean, do you think? Would you think that Mary and Peter? Do you think? I mean, I'm sort of with Esther on this. That actually they might not want to be compared to Jacob. It is quite a difficult thing, isn't it? If you've had a really famous father who's been very accomplished in a field. I mean, it does happen in lots of areas. It happens in sport as well. But it must be tough, I think, to follow, because you're always going to be compared with them.
Yeah, well, in some ways, of course, you get an interest in what your father or your mother does, and so that is a natural thing why people go into the same fields. But, equally, you may just feel anything I do in that world, I'll be judged as only I'll have achieved it because of my mum or father. So it's a mix, isn't it, the motivation?
Well, we spoke to both Mary and Peter, and they were naturally inquisitive. So we don't know if we're going to go there, but they were highly intelligent and naturally inquisitive as well about what we were doing. But coming up after the break, we'll be joined by the author of Love at War, Sandra Howard.
And we'll be playing part 2 of our exclusive interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, in which we ask him about his relationship with Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. It's 10:23.
We will shortly return to our exclusive interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, but before that, we're going to turn our attention to a recently released novel.
Love at War is the 7th novel by Sandra Howard and follows the loves, dramas and losses of a resourceful and exceptional girl.
Well, we're delighted to say that Sandra joins us now to tell us more about it. Hello, Sandra. Now, I want to say this quote at you, and this is from the Evening Standard. You'll probably know it. It describes you as less bonkers than Jilly Cooper and more fun than Joanne Trollope. Sandra Howard is a welcome addition to the modern woman's fiction. Their only question to you is, what's taken her so long? So my question to you, what's taken you so long to get into writing books?
Well, I think it was nerves, actually, Esther. I mean, not feeling I possibly could do it. And it takes a long time to turn out a commercial fiction book when you haven't written anything except a few articles of journalism. So it's been a long journey, but this is the 7th, so I've been taking this journey for a long time. And it's a fascinating story because it's based on truth, on true people. So I'm absolutely thrilled about it, really thrilled about it.
And that's what I was going to say, really. To be a wonderful...
World War II.
I was going to say, to be a great author, do you have to draw upon that knowledge? Because this is based on a true story.
It is based on a true story, and it helps with the timeline, and it helps with the research, really, because the journey this wonderful girl took was from Hamburg in 1938. She went home to Scotland when the war was imminent, and she jumped on a ship to chase after somebody she met and was rather keen on, and she got as far as Cairo. So she had a year there working in an American mission school, and from there the story goes on. But she has a lot of trials, and she grows through all the things that happen to her, because she's young when she goes out. She's more mature, although she's still young at the end of the war.
Sandra, the book's done. It's done brilliantly well. I know it keeps selling out of every time it gets printed. It keeps selling out. So it's clearly doing very well. I just wonder, for those of us who have sort of thought about writing a book but wouldn't know where to start, how long does it take you to write one of these novels?
It varies a lot. I mean, some people write one every year, and they're all good. But I'm not like that. And this book's taken me a very long time, because we moved house in the middle. We had lockdown and COVID, and I started writing it in third person and changed it to the first person. So it all took a long time. Anyway.
And are you already working on an eighth novel as we speak?
Well, I'd like to get this one off the ground. It's only been out a short time, but there's a little idea there, sort of churning away. But it's going back into contemporary, I think. Is it a good way to get away from Michael, your husband? Say, I'm writing another book, Michael. I need some space. I need some time on my own. Well, you've hit it on the nail, Esther. Absolutely, because he has a habit. He's been wonderfully supportive. But he does have a habit, when I've just got my characters about to have a fantastic emotional love scene or something, and he'd knock on the door and say, "Want a cup of coffee?" and that was his way of saying, "Have you answered the emails? Have you written so-and-so? Have you got the cleaning?" He just wanted to have a chat. But it's always at that moment when you've got the characters on a high.
You know what we're going to have to buy her, Sandra? We're going to have to buy her a do not disturb sign to hang on your door there. But I do notice you've got a lot of fans and followers, because I see Joanna Lumley has praised your book. I think she's called yours a ravishing read. You've got Jilly Cooper, marvellously observed. How do you think you've got all these female fans?
Well, it's wonderful. It really is. I can't believe it. But the book is this one, I think, is my favourite. It really is, because it's been such a journey to take with the characters, and it's all about character. I once met Iris Murdoch, and she said, I was just writing the first draft of my first book, and I said, you couldn't bear to give me one tip, and she said, character. It's all about character. If there's a plot, it'll come from the characters. And that was brilliant to have that tip, because that's what it is. You just need to feel involved with the characters.
Sandra Howard, thank you very much indeed. You're a character and your husband's a character, so you've got them all around you. Thank you very much for joining us today. But back now to our exclusive sit-down interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, in which we ask him about his relationship with the Prime Minister. This is another character, Boris Johnson, and the government's pandemic response.
Now, when did you first decide that you wanted Boris to be Prime Minister?
I thought he was by far and away the best candidate in 2016, and I was going to support him then, had his campaign continued, and I would have carried on supporting him. I'd switched to Michael Gove once Boris had decided not to go for it. And then we saw the difficulties that Theresa May got into, and it became absolutely clear to me that there was only one candidate who could possibly deliver for us and have the charisma and reach that Boris Johnson has, that successfully won the 2019 election, dealt with Brexit and so on. As long as there was a contest and he was a runner, he was somebody I was going to back.
How would you score his government and his time as Prime Minister out of 10?
I think his government has been extremely successful. even in the areas where I have been slightly more cautious. So if you take Brexit, Brexit was delivered. And from the starting point he had with the deal that was on the table beforehand, that was really a brilliant success. During the pandemic, it may not surprise you to know, indeed we may even have discussed it at the time, I was very much in favour of a more liberal approach and allowing people to make decisions for themselves. Nonetheless, I think the PM got all the big choices right and did what he almost had to do. There was much less discretion over it than I think you or I would have liked, because if you're being told by all the senior advisors who are meant to know about this sort of thing that you will kill people if you don't have a lockdown, you're taking a huge risk in not having a lockdown. And obviously he got the decision over the vaccine right. But also interestingly, though this cost a lot of money, over getting the PPE supplies. You remember the panic there was to get these supplies, and actually the UK managed to deliver them. A lot of them produced domestically. I think we went from under 1% being produced domestically to 80% being produced domestically, excluding gloves, as it happens. And so he got the big decisions right. And then at Christmas, he was the one who decided that we would not close down again. And that was proved to be the right decision, because Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland did close down with no better result than we had in England. And all the advice was telling him not to from the experts. But he made the bold decision. He thought the British people could be trusted to make decisions for themselves. And that had a huge benefit economically and societally. So he got that right, and he got Ukraine right, which I think is one of the biggest foreign policy decisions of our lifetimes, possibly the biggest foreign policy decision since the Falklands. So really important things he's got right. The area where I think the government has not been so strong is on economic policy. But there's somebody else that I would blame for that.
So if I was to be critical of the Boris Johnson government and his record, I would say we had the lockdowns, which, you know, a socialist would have been proud of the restrictions on people's
They all
freedoms.
voted for it. They were that proud of it.
Absolutely. That we had the, as you've just alluded to, the highest burden of taxation probably on record, and he's the First Lord of the Treasury. We've had the banning of buy one, get one free offers that he brought forward, and all this sort of nanny state kind of stuff. We left the EU, as you said, but we still had the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is carved up the United Kingdom. So people might look at that and say, well, actually, that doesn't sound like a particularly strong record to me.
Well, I think if we talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol, we got Brexit done, and we're now dealing with the Northern Ireland Protocol. And that actually the one person who has been pushing that most strongly is Liz Truss, who, as everyone remembers, voted Remain and has shown herself to be somebody who can put Brexit into practice. I share your concern on the tax burden. I thought the national insurance increase was a mistake. I argued strongly against it. Actually, there was quite an amusing circumstance. After the cabinet that approved it, I went on to another meeting with the chief whip and suddenly realised I'd left my telephone outside the cabinet room, went back to get it, and then came out of Downing Street half an hour after everybody else, and I got a message from Sky News saying, was I being persuaded out of resigning? No, not at all. I just had left my telephone in the wrong place.
That's how front page stories start.
I thought that was a mistake, and I think conventional Treasury thinking has been consistently wrong. So for 2021-22, the Treasury thought the deficit would be £106 billion worse than it actually was. Tax revenues have come in ahead of expectations and some spending has been below. And we have had these increases in tax rates on the basis of wonky OBR forecasts. We then have this absolutely lunatic rise in corporation tax on the basis that hitting companies is free. Well, it isn't. If you put up corporation tax, companies that invest in the UK require a net margin. They will not invest without being able to achieve that net margin, or to achieve it, what do? They cap wage rises or they increase prices. So you add to inflationary problem, and there is this ridiculous idea in the Treasury that hitting big companies is free, doesn't hurt people. Of course it does. It hits the very consumers who are suffering from a cost of living problem at the moment.
But why do you not blame Boris for these things? I mean, he's the Prime Minister. He's the First Lord of the Treasury. He's the person who's in charge of the government. Why do you excuse him from blame from those things?
Because I think you assume that the Prime Minister is a dictator, and he isn't. He's first among equals. And I know we tend to look at our elections in an increasingly presidential style, but the reality of cabinet government is that a vast swathe of decisions are made by ministers. And yes, the Prime Minister has the authority to overrule them, but the overrule is very unusual. And the Treasury is a particularly strong department that actually has the ability to block a lot of what other departments are doing.
I wanted to ask you something. I know you said 2016 is when you sort of got involved and you would have pursued the leadership further with Boris. When did you first meet him? Was it at school? Was it at university? Where was it?
No, neither of those. I think Boris and I first really got to know each other after a party conference.
I was going to say after a party.
Party conference. After I'd been selected for North East Somerset. And the two biggest gaff makers at the conference were one B. Johnson and J. Rees-Mogg, which you may think is true to form in both cases.
What were they? What were the gaffs?
I can't remember precisely what Boris had done, but I'd given an interview to Newsnight where I'd been disparaging about the A-list and the approach to Cameronisation of the Conservative Party.
That wasn't a gaff, JP.
Well, I didn't think you would disagree.
Joining us again to discuss what Jacob Rees-Mogg had to say is Tim Montgomery. Tim, I just wonder what you think about what Jacob really thinks about Boris's record in government, because I still sort of have a sneak feeling that if Theresa May had been head of the government and done exactly the same things, Jacob would have been one of its biggest critics. What do you think?
I suspect I agree with you, Phil, on that. And I think he was particularly generous to the Prime Minister on lockdown, because I think, like you, I think Jacob has always been quite a sceptic about lockdown. And I think, funnily enough, that's going to be the thing that maybe history judges the Prime Minister most harshly for. Because I think we're beginning to see more and more evidence, really, the abuse of children, increased obesity amongst people, various forms of addiction, failure to diagnose cancer. I can absolutely understand why the lockdown decisions were taken, particularly at the beginning when we didn't know whether COVID was COVID or the bubonic plague, or something like similar. But I think with time went on, it became increasingly clear we were paying a massive price for something that wasn't as serious as we initially feared. And I think history will not be kind or generous to any of the politicians who continue to take the decisions that they did.
I mean, we were against the lockdown. We voted against them throughout. But
the first one, like you said, March, we said, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
But it was after that, once you knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, did Jacob have a fair point? So it's easy. It's easy for me and Esther on the backbenches to vote against a lockdown. If you're the Prime Minister and you've got the Chief Scientific Advisor and the Chief Medical Officer saying that, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die if you don't lock down... Would you not give him some benefit of that? Even if Boris was slightly sceptical about it, that really you could argue maybe he didn't have much choice.
There's the thing that always most struck me about the whole process. The people really were very frightened. I thought the British people were slightly different. And so you had not only the Chief Medical Officer and all those other, experts from SAGE, etc., that you mentioned, but you mustn't have known it from your two sets of constituents. People generally were frightened about COVID and continue to be frightened about it.
But the government ramped up that fear, and equally we've spoken to and worked with over the last 2 years various other scientists, and there were other views.
Yeah.
But a small selection were chosen with the same view, and some of those had, for many, many years, given out wrong figures and stats, or at least aired at the sort of most extreme range of what could have happened there. So I think he seemed to have an excuse for Boris on every turn, to be fair, on whether that was Brexit lockdown, the economic sort of taxation sort of rate we're at. So I felt he had a lot of excuses for Boris myself. Am I being a bit harsh?
Yeah, well, look, so people, I mean, we'd love to hear what you think. We'd love to hear what you think about the interview generally, but we'd love to hear what you think about that, whether Jacob's being too kind to Boris or whether he was right in what he said. Let us know. Please tell us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, coming up after the break, we're joined in the studio by lawyer and broadcaster Andrew Ebon to discuss some of the biggest stories this week from the legal world.
And we want to hear from you on that interview, as Philip's just said. So email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. The time's almost 10:42.
Your views have been coming through about the interview. We've got a variety of views. Linda is saying, loving your interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg. This man is a brilliant speaker and represents true British family values. Well done, GB News.
Patricia says, Parliament is closed for several weeks in a time of crisis, ! This should be cut down to 2 weeks. The country is on the brink of collapse. But remember, government's working throughout. MPs are working actually throughout, so we can be brought back and have been at other times.
Thomas says about the interview, the Jacob Rees-Mogg interview is fascinating. He is posh, but he comes across as a real approachable person who believes what he is saying. Absolutely, I think that's true. Although Mohammed has a different view. Mohammed says, Jacob Rees-Mogg, what rubbish this man speaks, just like a rich man with privileges, with no cost of living crisis and no financial problems at all.
And Leslie, morning, guys. I'm an avid viewer of GB News, and my opinion is it's the best news channel going. I thought I'd end on that one there.
Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate that. But keep your views coming, whatever you think. We'll happily read them out, whether they're positive or negative. Now, back now to our interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we started by asking him about his schooling at Eton College.
People always say, oh, Eton, the school they went to, is the school that, thinks it will rule the country. They invariably do. So I wonder, is the Eton blood thicker than any other kind of blood? Are your friendships tighter than anybody else's?
No, not at all. I think one's friendships that go back to school and university days are strong friendships. I think that's certainly true, and I think that's true for many people. But I think when I was at Eton, nobody thought that Eton would produce another Prime Minister. We thought the last one was Alec Douglas-Home, and that it was all rather marvellous that we had this political history, but that it was very unlikely that would carry on.
Why was that? Why did you not think you'd have another one?
Well, I think we thought that society had changed and that therefore it was very unlikely that an Etonian would get into the position of winning a leadership contest. And then Douglas Hurd tried when John Major got it, and his campaign didn't go very well and concentrated a lot on the fact that he was an old Etonian.
Was that then Margaret Thatcher moving it on, do you think, went to the people rather than people who thought they were the ruling class?
Margaret Thatcher was a believer in meritocracy, and that, I think, doesn't promote or discriminate against old Etonians. I think the idea that you have first-class people who are good enough to do the job. But actually, I think with both David Cameron and Boris Johnson, and I wasn't ideologically close to David Cameron, But I think he had many virtues as a Prime Minister. I think he was a serious and substantial figure. And I think Boris Johnson is a remarkable political figure, one you get extremely rarely, with an extraordinary reach and charisma, an understanding of how the nation runs. And they both happened to be Old Etonians. I think it's more important the abilities they brought than where they were educated. Though I much prefer Boris Johnson's approach to it, because David Cameron always seemed rather apologetic about being an Old Etonian. And I don't think one should be, because Eton is a fantastic school. Any sensible education policy would want to make every school in the country as good as Eton, not to say, isn't it a pity we have this amazing world-beating school in this country.
What do you think then was Boris's demise?
Oh, there are all sorts of reasons. I think part of the reason has to be Brexit. There are still a lot of people who resent the fact we left the European Union, and therefore to bring down the standard bearer of Brexit was a triumph for them. And you had people like Lord Heseltine and Lord Demise saying no Boris, no Brexit. And I think they really thought that. And I very much hope it's not true, that I think we've taken a risk. The establishment of the Conservative Party, I mean, look where the Cameroon establishment are, other than Philip, actually, eccentrically. They're all with Rishi. So the Cameroon establishment never really warmed to Boris, for all sorts of reasons.
But the Thatcher supporters are also with Rishi, aren't they? He's got Howard, he's got Lawson, and Peter Lilly.
Michael Howard was a great backer of David Cameron.
Indeed, that's true. That's true, but they were in Thatcher's cabinet.
Prepared him for the leadership, and William Hague, who was obviously Cameron's Foreign Secretary for an extended period.
But Lawson forcefully came
Nigel Lawson, if only Rishi had been a Lawson-esque Chancellor, we wouldn't be in the state that we're in today.
Now, Dominic Cummings. People might think the demise started there. Why did he employ him?
Because Dominic Cummings had been very successful, that he'd been a very important part of the referendum campaign. He seemed to be good at understanding the mood of the British people and campaigning on it, that his eccentricity seemed a price to be worth paying for his genius. And both of them are there. In the end, it turned out that his eccentricity was absurd and self-serving, and that he thought he was Prime Minister. And that was never going to work.
And then the other person people will question after the sort of the 2016 leadership that never happened was Michael Gove. Why did he bring Michael Gove in? People would say, crikey, the reports at the time, he was stabbed in the front and he never, managed to take the leadership at that time.
Well, Michael is a very able politician, a clever, interesting man.
And so he overlooked what might have been seen as this sort of backstabbing side because he thought he was an able politician.
I think all Prime Ministers have to appoint a range of people to their cabinets, and they need people who can run large departments. Michael had shown at education, where potentially Michael's the best education secretary in recent history. Kenneth Baker would be perhaps a contender for that title against him. But the two of them fundamentally reformed education for the better. After a number of education secretaries, including Margaret Thatcher, who closed a number of grammar schools, though it was very hard for her to refuse under the laws applying at the time. But those two were really transformative education secretaries. And having ministers who can run a department is something Prime Ministers don't necessarily have a huge supply of.
Does Boris really shoulder any responsibility for his demise?
Of course he does. People are always responsible for the things that they do themselves. That doesn't mean there are other people who weren't waiting there to catch them.
Listen, the world of politics, as you and I know, it is probably more complicated than anything else. I'm asking you these questions. But is Rishi to blame, really?
In what way?
That of his downfall, people will say, and you will be one of them, you're backing Liz Truss because Rishi did him a disservice, and that was part of the triggering and the downfall.
I don't particularly want to go into Mr. Sunak's personal behaviour. I think better to stick to his economic policy, and I think the Treasury orthodoxy has not been working and needed fundamental change. And I've been saying that consistently for some time. That isn't a thing that I've suddenly come out with, and I'd rather discuss the leadership in terms of the policies that I think need changing rather than individuals' behaviour, for better or worse.
OK, fair point.
So, Tim Montgomery, I don't know where to begin. There's a couple of key points. One, what do you think about Jacob saying, really, Boris's demise really is down to Brexit and the establishment getting rid of him? Do you think that's true?
I think this is a pyramid of piffle or whatever it was that Boris once said. Look, I'm back Brexit hugely. I think it's probably the most consequential thing that we've voted for that the Conservative Party has achieved in a generation. I fully support it. But that didn't bring down Boris Johnson, not at all. I think it was a combination of two things. It was certainly the ethical failures, like over Partygate. But personally, I don't know whether you two would agree with this, but I think it was he would have got away with those ethical failures, rightly or wrongly, if his government was seen to be doing bold things that were worth having, like reforming and simplifying the tax system, like a Lawsonian budget reform, or building houses, doing some things that the country really needed. I think it was the absence of a big agenda, using that majority of 80 for a good purpose, and of the not Brexit at all. Of course, there's some people who have always hated Boris because of Brexit, but he would have got away with that opposition if he was doing stuff.
I picked out a couple of names there, Dominic Cummings, Michael Gove, and people will say Boris was never a great judge of horseflesh, and sometimes he surrounds himself with people who didn't maybe have his best interests at heart. So I gave those as examples. Do you think he didn't build the team that everybody thought he was going to do, like when he was London Mayor, great sort of advisors?
Well, I supported, actually. Well, I think the boldest decision he took was just, expel, was it the 20 MPs when they were resisting the delivery of Brexit. I thought that was an incredibly important decision. But I think what he failed to do after winning that historic election was to bring all people like Jeremy Hunt, etc., and others back into the cabinet to build a government of all the talents. And I think he surrounded himself actually with a pretty low-calibre cabinet. And I think that made him vulnerable as well.
I thought that one of the questions that Esther asked, which always fascinated me, was about Michael Gove. Because, of course, Michael Gove completely did for Boris in the 2016 leadership election. Yeah. Completely took his rug from under his feet at the time. I don't think there's many people in politics who would ever have trusted Michael Gove again if they'd been Boris Johnson. Yeah. It seems to me quite extraordinary that he did. What do you put it down to?
Absolutely sure, but I would say I don't agree with Michael on anything, and I certainly thought what he did in 2016 to Boris was deeply treacherous, actually. But he's probably one of the most accomplished cabinet ministers of modern time. You raised it in the interview, his education reform agenda. I know ministers during the whole COVID experience said the one person they really knew they had to prepare for in a cabinet committee discussion was with Michael Gove. He always asked the tough questions. He's got that record in government that few other people have. So in a way, I thought it was one of Boris's better decisions, the most generous decisions, was to have him there.
Jim, we'll come back to you a little bit later on. We'll also talk about Rishi and what he thought there, even if he called him Mr. Sunak, and he wasn't going to say anything, and he's obviously not backing him at all, but we'll come back to that a little bit later on.
We're now joined in the studio by Andrew Ebon to talk about the biggest stories this week from the legal world. So, Andrew, what have you got for us this week?
Well, it's been an extraordinary week yet again in the legal world. Jerry Hall and Rupert Murdoch are no longer an item, as we've heard. It's been an interesting play-out of the divorce which happened, because it was sort of, people were not quite sure what was going on. Put it into context, in June it was, Jerry received an email from Rupert saying, it's all over, we're only going to communicate now through lawyers.
She just got off a plane or something, just travel back to the UK, and then you arrive at home, get this email. Well, if that's not going to make you sue for a divorce, if it's like, we're not speaking anymore, it's over, and we just have email contact, unbelievable.
Absolutely. So what she then did is she decided, where shall I file? And you have a choice in divorce. If you've got a connection to a particular country, a particular place, you can file in that place. She decided on California, and there are two reasons for that. Is one, they have what's called a community of property state. In other words, whatever's bought during the marriage, you share 50-50. And a number of things were bought during the marriage. There was a 200 million ranch called Beaverhead, as it was. And basically, that was one of the properties. And there was another place in Henley-on-Thames for about 12 million. The other reason she picked that...
A meagre 12 million.
Trifling 12 million.
Trifling, absolutely. What was interesting as well, that she cited as her address was a place called Moraga Vineyard. Now, Moraga Vineyard is one of the prized possessions in the Murdoch empire. It was the home of Victor Fleming, you might remember him well. He used to have it as a horse ranch, and he played host to Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh and various others. Spencer Tracy, I think, went there. And it's one of their wonderful homes. But that's what she cited in the Californian papers as her home. So it's rather a sort of a game of homes, I guess you could call it.
What I want to know, Andrew, while Esther's not listening, hopefully, yes. Where is the best place to get divorced? Is it in the UK or is it in the US?
Well, what I would encourage to do, and I always encourage, jaw, not war, is what I'm trying to do. And what the court's trying to do now, and this is why it's about a settlement. You might recall during the week some of the papers carried the fact saying that she's no longer going ahead with this. She's wants this dismissed as a case. Now, what they didn't all the reports add is that that's because a settlement has been reached. And the dismissal was what they call without prejudice. And what that means, it could be revived if the settlement didn't work out. Now, I think Jerry Hall did get what she wanted, in spite of her previous partner's lyrics, says you might not always get what you want. I think she probably did, because she's now got 2 homes. She's got the place in Henley, she's got a place in France, which we understand, and several million to play around with.
And I thought what was interesting, what I read, when she'd put the divorce, I think she placed it in America and the UK, the reason it was settled is because one of them would have shown all of Murdoch's financial, I don't know what he owns, basically. And that's what he didn't want. And that's what actually pushed him to give her a settlement.
Absolutely a very clever point. This is what people do. And legal cases are always about negotiation.
Yeah.
And what he didn't want were all his affairs, financial or otherwise, splashed all over the paper. And she even said in the documents that she's unaware of the full nature and extent of all assets and debts, and will amend the petition when they have been ascertained. So in other words, she sort of threatened this in the papers. So you're absolutely right. Murdoch didn't want that. The way Murdoch operates is he's very quick, he's very fast. They got married in a record time. They got divorced in record time.
And he paid out a huge amount in record time. But Amanda Platel today in the paper said, I can't believe that she's taking any money. Why would she want to do that? And I thought, when you're kind of divorced through an email on a flight, it might sort of make you angry.
Oh, I thought there would have been a prenuptial agreement.
There was a prenuptial agreement, and the enforceability of those is also questionable in certain situations. If you've been forced into a prenup, if there are certain things which are unconscionable or unfair, they can reopen those. But it's better than her separation from Mick Jagger, when he basically declared the whole marriage was null and void. You might remember what he was sort of saying in that situation.
Yes,
but they got married in Bali.
But they weren't actually married, were they?
Because it was a wonderful Hindu marriage ceremony, which didn't count, is what they said.
Only adding to the rumours that Mick Jagger is as tight as you like.
Hey.
She thought she was married to him. They had,
He must have
4 children.
He must have Yorkshire blood in him.
But no, he then said this wasn't a marriage at all. Yeah. Andrew, Ebon, brilliant, as always, bringing us the latest there on what the strange goings-on in the legal world.
That's it for the first hour. Coming up in the next hour, we'll have the final part of our interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we'll be speaking to author Gillian Bridge about mental health and her latest book. So don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with me, Esther, and him, Philip. Coming up this hour, we continue our conversation with Jacob Rees-Mogg and ask him exactly why he's backing Liz Truss to be Prime Minister. That and much more after your latest headlines with Tatiana.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I am Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Sir Salman Rushdie's agent says the author is on a ventilator and may lose an eye after he was attacked on stage during an event in New York yesterday. The 75-year-old was appearing at a literary festival when he was repeatedly stabbed in the neck and abdomen. He's faced several death threats from Islamists since the 1989 publication of his book, The Satanic Verses. The New York State Police have named the suspect as 24-year-old Hadi Matar. He remains in custody. Well, speaking to GB News, the former US Trade Representative Steve Gill claimed security provided at the event was inadequate.
We're learning from the investigators that there had been requests for more security for him, and the institution had decided not to do that because they didn't want a barrier between the attendees and the speakers, the guests. They thought that would kind of chill the whole approach of free speech that they were promoting.
Rail passengers face further disruption as drivers at 9 train companies walk out over pay and conditions. West Coast Services, LNER, London Overground and Southeastern are affected. Some parts of the country will have no services at all. The Independent's travel editor Simon Calder argues that unions are striking now to cause maximum disruption.
Of course, what As Left, the Train Drivers Union, wants to do is cause absolute peak damage to travel plans. And that's why they've chosen a Saturday in the middle of August, because they know it's really going to hit families hard. It's going to hit those travellers who absolutely depend on rail to get to and from their holidays, to go on day trips. They're just doing all they can to cause as much harm as they can.
Meanwhile, the Post Office say they will stage fresh strikes for 3 days at the end of August. The Communication Workers Union has announced staff will walk out on the 26th, the 27th and the 30th in an escalating dispute over pay. New court documents show the FBI has seized several top-secret files during a search at Donald Trump's estate in Florida. A federal judge approved a warrant to carry out a search at the former president's Mar-a-Lago property. It's after the US government said it's possible he had violated the Espionage Act, a law that prohibits passing on or keeping national defense information. Mr. Trump has denied any wrongdoing and said the items were declassified. The Wealth Secretary has become the first cabinet minister to publicly switch sides in the Tory leadership race, putting his support behind Liz Truss. Well, writing in the Daily Telegraph, Sir Robert Buckland said he believed the Foreign Secretary's economic policy would help the country through the current cost of living crisis. Sir Robert described Truss as the right person to lead the country forward. The Environment Agency says drought conditions could last until next year. It's after more extreme heat is expected in the south of England this weekend, while the north is set to be struck by thunderstorms and floods. Amber weather warnings have been issued. Further, water companies could also enforce stricter measures to conserve supplies, with Yorkshire Water being the latest to introduce a hosepipe ban. Dr. Simon Boxall is a senior lecturer of oceanography at the University of Southampton, and he told GB News that we should plan for the future so this doesn't happen again.
You compare us now to 1976, when we had the last big drought, we're much better prepared than we used to be. But you have got what is tragically a sort of a series of events which has brought this very, very dry weather. And I think we do need to think about this in the future, because we are going to see more of these droughts.
Record numbers of people are getting checked for bowel cancer following the death of Dame Deborah James. The NHS says, thanks to her campaigning, people are taking the illness seriously and speaking to their GPs about it. Its figures show over 170,000 people went for checks between May and July. Dame Deborah, known as Bowel Babe, died from the disease at the end of June, aged just 40. US actress Anne Heche has died following a car crash last week. A warning, the following contains flashing images. The actress is known for films such as Volcano, Donnie Brasco and the 1998 remake of Psycho. According to her representative, she currently remains on life support to see if she's a potential match for organ donation. However, she's considered to be legally dead under California law after suffering severe brain damage. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back to the show. So let's return again to our exclusive interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we start this section by asking him about the leadership race and why he's supporting Liz Truss. Are you supporting Liz Truss, or are you just supporting the person who isn't Rishi Sunak?
No, I'm supporting Liz positively because as long as I've known her back to 2010, I've known her a little before, but known her better since 2010, she has been a real free market conservative. She set up the free enterprise group of members of parliament to campaign for proper conservative economic policy, and therefore I'm confident that she will challenge the Treasury orthodoxy to get an economic policy that's actually in favour of growth and understands that other things being equal is one of the great mistakes of policy making.
You see, it seems unlikely, doesn't it, really, that you'd be supporting Liz Truss, former Lib Dem, wanted the monarchy abolished, she supported Remain in the referendum, campaigned for Remain in the referendum, she backed Theresa May to the hilt and her deal all the way through to the hilt. It seems with that sort of background, it's an unlikely person for Jacob Rees-Mogg to be supporting.
Not necessarily. I have heard Liz say that you'd have to be pretty odd to hold the same beliefs at whatever her age now is as you held when you were 17. I hold exactly the same beliefs. So that's the one thing I do disagree with. My views have hardly changed at all, and I very much doubt yours have either. But actually, I think having somebody who understands that what they thought earlier in life isn't right, and particularly with the referendum, accepts enthusiastically what the British people gave her to deal with. And she's not alone in that. I've always thought the most impressive Remainers are the ones who, once the result came in, said, OK, that's it, I'm accepting it, and I want now to do it properly. And there are a number of those. There are quite a lot who say that and don't really mean it. But I found in government that Liz, other than the Prime Minister himself, was my greatest supporter for getting Brexit opportunities in the Cabinet Committee that she chaired, when other people who are now saying we should grasp the opportunities of Brexit were opposing them.
But she hasn't said that she accepts the result. She's gone further than that. She says that she got it wrong, that she should have supported Brexit. She got it wrong. And I just wondered, does somebody who got the biggest decision of our lifetime wrong, is that the person that we want to be the Prime Minister of our country?
Well, how often do you ever hear a politician say, I got that wrong, and admit it and say, look, I got it wrong and now I'm going to do better? I think that's brilliant. I think it's very refreshing. And she's enthusiastic about it. And that's terrific, because if we're to get the benefits of Brexit, we need enthusiasm. It's fascinating. With the retained EU law and getting rid of it, there is inevitable inertia, because it's a lot of work to do, to transfer laws from the EU to us, to get rid of laws that we don't need. The Treasury wanted all tax law exempt from this process, so it would remain part of EU law, remain subject to the supremacy of EU law. Other departments were more or less enthusiastic. To his great credit, George Eustace was willing to take it on, even though DEFRA probably has more work to do than any other department. But that wasn't true of all departments. And so having somebody who's really keen to do it and will drive it through is fundamental.
But she's lucky there, isn't she? She's somebody who can say, I was wrong, and now can see the way forward. That's a positive for her. Most politicians in a job who say, I got it wrong, it will be viewed as a negative, because they've then got to dig out of what they've got wrong and redo something in policy.
Not really. I think that if you look at Theresa May's approach, who said, "Oh, I accept the result," and then did nothing about it. Actually, clearly thought the result was wrong all the way through her premiership. That didn't work. I think you need to accept that you're starting from scratch. And what she says she got wrong was that she believed what was coming out of the Treasury. And that's actually very helpful because she's now very suspicious of the Treasury orthodoxy. Bear in mind, the Treasury said we'd have to have a panic budget if we dared to vote to leave the European Union on what would happen just because of a vote to leave before a single change had been made in any of our laws. And there is a sort of absurdity about Treasury orthodoxy that Liz has seen through. And Rishi is part of. He was the Treasury orthodoxy man.
But, you know, Liz says that she's against lockdowns, she's against the nanny state things like the buy one, get one free stuff, she's against the tax rises. Is she just jumping on a bandwagon with these things, or did she argue against these things in government and nobody listened to her?
Most of the points, when they came up, if they came to the Cabinet, Liz and I were saying exactly the same thing. The other person who was broadly saying the same thing was David Frost.
Well, joining us again is Tim Montgomery. Tim, what did you make of that? I mean, I put it to Jacob that Liz Truss was an unlikely person for him to be supported, and perhaps he was just supporting the candidate who wasn't Rishi Sunak. What do you make of that?
It's clear, even the way Jacob Rees-Mogg says Mr. Sunak, you know, there is no love lost there at all. It seems to me, I don't know whether you two agree with this, but that Jacob is more anti-Sunak than pro-Liz. Although, to be fair to him, they've clearly worked in cabinet together, and he has seen what Liz Truss has been arguing privately. And I think on lockdown, Liz Truss was more of a sceptic about lockdown, and certainly she argued against the national insurance tax rise. But just watching Jacob Rees-Mogg talk to you both, when he's making the case against the Treasury and against Rishi Sunak, he just seems to come more alive and animated in a Jacob Rees-Mogg measured sort of way. But that seems to be what really is motivating him to me in this contest.
Oh, I'd agree with you completely. And I like to see where people see Rishi Sunak did have loyalty or he didn't have loyalty, because in a way, he didn't agree with the national insurance contribution rise, but he was being loyal to Boris because Boris wanted it for extra money to go into social care. So it's interesting how history is unfolding or people are rewriting it. And I'd agree with you that it's more that he'd sooner, you know, he doesn't like Rishi, well, I'll have to go with Liz. And I think...
My understanding is that actually Rishi Sunak didn't want the national insurance.
That's right, he didn't.
He has come to defend it because
he was being, that's right, and he was being loyal to Boris, whereas Liz has had the freedom to say, oh, I didn't agree with it. So it's very interesting how this is unfolding. And I think she's like the great illusionist, that people can read into what she's saying, and she's bringing people over, and that could be a brilliance in a strategy.
Did you haven't declared in the
No.
leadership contest? Are you going to decide at some point? Are you staying neutral?
No, I'm not going to declare. I think we all got the same vote. It's one vote each at the very beginning, because I could see the fallout, and it was like, who's the least worst option? I was saying, you've got a year to deliver. You need to bring the party together. You've got to bring the country together. Brexit Remainers, lockdown, anti-lockdown, have a key set of policies in advance and deliver for the next year, none of which we've seen. For me, it's important you know the team and you know what people believe in. And I did that to support Jeremy Hunt, him who was more lockdown, then said we won't lock down, and him saying we've got to deliver Brexit. And I felt that was key. It's about the country and not us and some psychodrama.
When you see Jacob's reaction to Mr. Sunak and the things he said, do you think that Rishi Sunak would have a difficulty bringing the Conservative Party together? People like Jacob Rees-Mogg, keeping those people happy?
Yeah, it'd have a problem with me as well. We were talking about this a little bit before the programme, Phil. I think some journalist today has referred to Rishi Sunak's recent behaviour almost as kamikaze. And I have some sympathy with that, actually. I think he began the campaign really warning that Liz Truss's support for tax cuts potentially would be inflationary because it was a loosening of fiscal policy. He's now talking about borrowing for good reasons to help the poor through the energy crisis. But there's a real inconsistency there, and some of the language that he's using, some of the language that Dominic Raab is using, I think it's dangerous for party unity after this, and this seems to almost be a battle between people in different parties rather than inside. And so I am worried about the party coming together after this.
And do you think Liz Truss will be able to bring... I mean, obviously there's been throughout this thing the sort of blue-on-blue attacks that people have been talking about. You know, some of it's been quite graphic, some of the personal attacks. Do you think both of them are going to have a difficulty, or do you think it'll be easier for her to be...
Well, I think the party's in trouble generally. You know, we've been in power now for 12 long years. They've been eventful years, and I think we're going through difficult times. But I think, you know, Liz Truss wasn't my candidate in the beginning. I am supporting her now as the better of the two, in my view. But I think to defend her, she hasn't gone after Rishi Sunak in the same way. She hasn't, for example, talked about, you know, his wife's non-dom status and things like that. She's, I think, played it sort of more by Queensberry rules than he has. But I'm sure some people, no doubt some of the viewers and listeners will disagree with that as well.
I mean, is there a massive difference between these two candidates philosophically? I mean, from what I've seen on lots of things, whether it's been, we did our interview with Rishi, we talked about grooming gangs and illegal immigration and whatever. They both seem to be saying in answer to the questions pretty much the same things when people ask. The big difference seems to have been about taxes and cutting taxes or not cutting taxes. But really, the difference is Liz Truss says we should cut taxes now, and Rishi Sunak says we should cut taxes in a year or two's time. I mean, it's not a massive philosophical difference between the two.
No, and of course you shouldn't. We are all in the same party, or they are all in the same party, so there shouldn't be a massive difference. I just get the sense, and you never really know the strength of a tea bag until they're in hot water. It's in hot water. So we don't know until Liz Truss is Prime Minister what she'll really be like. I just get the sense about Liz Truss that there's something more of a change merchant in her than Rishi. I think that she will be more willing to overturn the apple cart when it needs to be overturned than Rishi. That's the sense I get.
Well, I think the thing that's most important, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg, without a doubt, is a kingmaker. I mean, he really ensured that he was doing all the hard work to make sure Boris was elected. A lot of the members like Jacob. The fact that he has come out for Liz, I think, will absolutely benefit her and get her over the line. If he'd backed Rishi, I think that would have got him possibly over the line. So I think he is an important person. And when you'd ask, would he like to be leader? And, oh, no, I wouldn't. I do believe one day he could be leader of the party, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Maybe in like a Mike... Yes, maybe like in a Michael Howard kind of way. Do you think so? Well, is this a bit of a contentious question here?
Well, do you remember when he called the Scottish Conservative leader lightweight on Newsnight and refused to apologise for it? You know, he said there would have to be a general election if Boris Johnson got rid. I think he defended Boris Johnson too stoutly, and I think he was willing to damage the Conservative Party in the process of defending the leader of the Conservative Party. And I think that sort of thing won't easily be forgotten by people. So, yes, you're right, Esther. He's popular amongst the grassroots. But I think he's controversial in a way that I think will serve him badly. And can we have another Etonian as well as Tory leader?
I was asking those questions.
It's funny, though, because he did make reference to Douglas Hurd standing in the leadership election in 1990. And I do remember Douglas Hurd being pressed massively about the fact back then that he was an old Etonian. And I remember in one interview, I think he said, in frustration, well, I am actually standing to be leader of the Conservative Party, not the Revolutionary Communist Party. But it was a massive issue back then, and it's amazing.
And I ask, could Jacob at a future time be a leader? Our viewers like him as well. John, on Jacob, he's an absolute gem of a politician.
Yeah, Raquel says, great interview with the legend Jacob Rees-Mogg, thoroughly decent chap and full of fun, also backing the right candidate.
Michael, Jacob could be the best Prime Minister ever. He would tie Starmer up in knots and he'd be a great ambassador on the world stage.
Margie says Jacob is a true friend to Boris, and Paul says, I suspect the Tory party will regret betraying Boris. This guy had a very hard 2 years. They all had the knife out for him every day. Sunak was the biggest traitor, and I would never be able to stomach him.
And Elizabeth said, Mogg is not too soft on Boris. When we were asking that question before, was he giving him excuse for everything I asked? She says, Elizabeth says, he is meticulous when he sets the record straight. He is the only MP who's got the guts to do it thoroughly.
And John says, it seems that Jacob Rees-Mogg can be savaged and ridiculed for his accent, but if anyone criticised the Liverpudlian, Yorkshire, I don't know if you've got in mind here, John, Liverpudlian, Yorkshire or any other regional accent, they would be criticised.
But also I will say, John, I'm quite sure loads of people, don't they, rip accents mercilessly. And in a way, I always say this, when an accent becomes so posh, is that not an accent as well, just like any other one, Liverpool or a Yorkshire?
And Ronald says the perfect person for Prime Minister is the man appearing on GB News right now. Not me. Jacob Rees-Mogg. And the thing is, I mean...
and that's why I asked the question. I'd seen all these views.
He is very, very popular, not just with our viewers, but, I mean, I remember walking from the House of Commons one day to 10 Downing Street, which isn't very far, and it took us forever because, I mean, Jacob's he's like a movie star. Yeah. I mean, everyone wants a selfie with him and a photo with him and a chat with him and all the rest of it, and it took us forever. And I remember a steward at Bradford City Football Club saying to me, I think Jacob should be the next Prime Minister. I know he's posh and all that, he said to me, but he talks a lot of sense when I hear him. I think he is very popular.
But going back to what I said at the beginning, it was about bringing the party together to deliver for the country, and who can bring the party together. That's why I thought maybe like a Michael Howard figure in a time when he became leader, it could be. Look, who knows? None of us have a crystal ball, but we like to discuss what could possibly happen.
Coming up after the break, we'll be returning to our interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg with questions about Brexit. So don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back. It's 11:24. So let's return to Jacob Rees-Mogg and questions surrounding Brexit and working from home.
Have we reaped the benefits of Brexit?
Not yet, no. We've got much more to do. We've got some benefits already, and we saw that with vaccine rollout. We've seen it with some minor tax changes. We've seen it with the tentative beginnings of free ports. But there is a lot more that we can do. Solvency II could unleash tens of billions of pounds a year for investment in the economy. It's one of the biggest things we can do to boost the economy. There are other things we can do. We should get rid of all the tariffs on goods that we don't produce, which would be a help, not the biggest help, but a help to people in a cost of living crisis.
I was going to say, what do you think needs to be done to deliver those sort of Brexit bonuses?
There's the opportunity to take the 5% VAT off fuel, which we couldn't possibly do whilst we were in the European Union, but would be a help to every household.
Now, I've got to ask you about working from home and the civil servants and getting all this done, you know, after COVID, after Brexit. We all need to be there. Civil servants need to be in 5 days a week? There is so much to be done.
Oh, but people need to be in the office and to do their jobs properly, particularly if the job isn't being done properly at the moment. So I think you can judge by results that there are some jobs that can be done perfectly well from home. If you're a novelist, you can probably work very well at home. I think P.G. Wodehouse, whom I'm a great admirer, worked extremely effectively at home.
Could your dad have worked from home?
Oh, and did. That when he was editing the Times, of course he couldn't. He had to be there physically. But as a columnist, you can work from home perfectly reasonably. But if you're providing somebody with a passport, you need to be in the office. You can't allow people to be sending passports out from home. I was talking to somebody who rang the passport helpline, and there was a child in the background, and the person on the helpline had to go off to look after the child. And the person had been on hold to get through for ages and ages. This just isn't good enough. It's not a proper way, and the helpline is outsourced anyway, but it's not a proper way to deliver public services. And I went yesterday morning to the government office in Canary Wharf. Really high-class offices, very expensive. And I went onto a floor, and I was told all the floors were the same. They have 400 desks on a floor, and I'd be surprised if there were 40 people working there. And people said, well, people are on leave. Well, they can't all be on leave. It's just not good enough. And people need to be back at work, and all the service needs to be perfect. If there were no problems with DVLA, with the passport office, with the probate office, then you say, okay, it's fine. But these services are not delivering what the British public have a right to demand, and we are paying people as if they were going into work. They get their London allowance, and yet they are not going into the office and the service isn't being delivered. I think this is really important. And the frustrating thing is, although the Cabinet has decided this, permanent secretaries have decided this, the message is not getting through properly, except in some very specific areas. I was very impressed.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel, And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, welcome back. You might have noticed we just disappeared for a few moments, but we're back with you. And not only are we back with you, but Jacob Rees-Mogg is back with you too, finishing off what he was saying about Brexit and working from home.
Have we reaped the benefits of Brexit?
Not yet, no. We've got much more to do. We've got some benefits already, and we saw that with vaccine rollout. We've seen it with some minor tax changes. We've seen it with the tentative beginnings of free ports. But there is a lot more that we can do. Solvency II could unleash tens of billions of pounds a year for investment in the economy. It's one of the biggest things we can do to boost the economy. There are other things we can do. We should get rid of all the tariffs on goods that we don't produce, which would be a help, not the biggest help, but a help to people in a cost of living crisis.
I was going to say, what do you think needs to be done to deliver those sort of Brexit bonuses?
There's the opportunity to take the 5% VAT off fuel, which we couldn't possibly do whilst we were in the European Union, but would be a help to every household.
Now, I've got to ask you about working from home and the civil servants and getting all this done, you know, after COVID, after Brexit, we all need to be there. Civil servants need to be in 5 days a week? There is so much to be done.
People need to be in the office and to do their jobs properly, particularly if the job isn't being done properly at the moment. So I think you can judge by results that there are some jobs that can be done perfectly well from home. If you're a novelist, you can probably work very well at home. I think P.G. Wodehouse, whom I'm a great admirer, worked extremely effectively at home.
Could your dad have worked from home?
Oh, and did. That when he was editing the Times, of course he couldn't. He had to be there physically. But as a columnist, you can work from home perfectly reasonably. But if you're providing somebody with a passport, you need to be in the office. You can't allow people to be sending passports out from home. I was talking to somebody who rang the passport helpline, and there was a child in the background, and the person on the helpline had to go off to look after the child. And the person had been on hold to get through for ages and ages. This just isn't good enough. It's not a proper way, and the helpline is outsourced anyway, but it's not a proper way to deliver public services. And I went yesterday morning to the government office in Canary Wharf. Really high-class offices, very expensive. And I went onto a floor, and I was told all the floors were the same. They have 400 desks on a floor, and I'd be surprised if there were 40 people working there. And people said, well, people are on leave. Well, they can't all be on leave. It's just not good enough. And people need to be back at work, and all the service needs to be perfect. If there were no problems with DVLA, with the passport office, with the probate office, then you say, okay, it's fine. But these services are not delivering what the British public have a right to demand, and we are paying people as if they were going into work. They get their London allowance, and yet they are not going into the office and the service isn't being delivered. I think this is really important. And the frustrating thing is, although the Cabinet has decided this, permanent secretaries have decided this, the message is not getting through properly, except in some very specific areas. I was very impressed in a visit to our office in Birmingham that Ofsted was fully occupied. So the head of Ofsted believes working from the office is essential to create the team spirit that you need and so on. And the offices her team had were full. There were other teams with acres of space and nobody there.
How are you going to get people? You know, you've done the letter. You know, you're not in, please come in. You've done the, you know, get in. You've proved things aren't being done and we've got delays. What is it? What are we going to have to do?
It has to come down to line managers getting their people in and recognising that that is their contractual obligation. And we need to stop accepting excuses. So throughout the summer, there's been, well, since I started this, I was appointed in February, and I've been working on this since. So to begin with, it was the end of COVID restrictions. Then it was Easter. Then it was the Jubilee. Then there was a rail strike. Then it was hot. And nobody can do any work when it's hot, apparently, for 2 days in a century. And we all have to stay at home. And now, what's the excuse now? Oh, now it's August, so nobody can possibly. I mean, we're becoming French. Nobody being exposed.
No, we're less productive, I believe, than France now. We are going to have to say we need to.
We need to see people. We need people be back in the office, and I mean, I think either of the potential leaders are both committed to getting people back into work.
I think there was a tweet by one of the Sun journalists today who said, "Oh, this picture was just your office or something, Jacob, and that was the one you used." And I thought, well, I'm quite sure that would be the office you chose to take a photo of. I don't know.
No, it wasn't. The picture that I put on Twitter, I think it was given to me by another minister of somewhere in the Treasury office. My own office is much smaller than that, and the people who are in my private office is in and working very hard. But I could show you pictures of emptier offices than the one the Sun had.
Oh, Tim Montgomery's still with us. Tim, are you a working from home kind of person or a working from the office kind of person? Do you think Jacob's right in what he's saying?
Well, look, during lockdown, I live in Salisbury. And previously, before lockdown, I had to come up to London for every sort of TV interview I did. And actually, during lockdown, we learnt that we can do certain things from home, down the line, as we call it in the trade, much more easily. And I think that's been a freedom for people like me. But you wanted me in the studio today because there is you can talk and interrupt each other and have a conversation in a real human form, at the office, that you can't have down the line. It's much harder to interrupt people on a Zoom call. It's much harder to understand the body language of people. And I think, if you're established in your industry, I can understand why working from home suits you. But I know when I was particularly younger, it's the conversations after work, at the water cooler, in the pub, talking about the boss, understanding how things work. Certainly in journalism, it's the little conversations after meetings, it's what you overhear. You can't do that if you're not in a normal community social setting. So I'm very much with Jacob Rees-Mogg on this.
And there's certain jobs that obviously you have to go to work to do, to tend to physically do. So
it's a middle-class thing.
There is.
The people in supermarkets and those harder jobs, they don't have that choice.
But I think it's right. There are certain things you can do online, and with the cost of living coming forward, why take a £100 train journey if you could do that meeting on Zoom? So I think it does work in the mix. But for many of us, you need to be in work.
Do you not reckon that when winter comes with the energy bills, I bet there'll be nobody working from home then, will they? They'll all be racing into the office in winter.
Well, I don't know whether you ever if you see a news report that someone's broken into Tesco during this crisis, because I quite like the idea of laying down by the there is wonderful. So I quite like the idea of staying in air-conditioned places at the moment.
Now, we're going to go to the final section of our clip, and I think we might be saying goodbye to you here now, but as an interview, and with Jacob Rees-Mogg here, do you think he's been pretty forthright? Do you think he's given sort of a good insight into what's going on there and his relationships?
I like your two style for a start. I like the fact that two of you asking questions, two brains working on an interview. I think that works really well. So I like that format. I hope you'll do it again. I think the most important stuff he said is about the economy. I think the Tory party, that's where the Tory party has gone most adrift. We've lost that sense of a low tax, low regulation economy. And I don't know what Jacob Rees-Mogg's future is, but if he sticks on that cause and really keeps the party, honest on its economic policy, that's an important role for him.
Tim, thank you for breaking the train strike today and joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Now on to the final section of our exclusive Jacob Rees-Mogg interview, and we start by asking him why he didn't put his name forward for the leadership race.
Now, you're a very popular person with our members of the party and with the public, Jacob, so why did you not put your name forward for the leadership election?
Well, you're very kind. I'm not sure I am as popular as you're saying.
Oh, I'll back him up. You are.
Well, you're very kind. I thought that to get what I want to happen in government, to get the delivery of Brexit, to get a proper economic policy, people of my way of thinking needed to unite around a single candidate. And that single candidate was Liz Truss. That there are other people who I think very great admirer of Priti Patel, for instance. I think her efforts on immigration, which seem to be thwarted by what some people rather rudely call lefty lawyers, not a term I would of course dream of using, has done amazing work. But Priti didn't have the momentum. I think highly of Nadeem Zahawi, who I think is, in the short time he's been at Treasury trying to get to grips with it. But it seemed to me that Liz was much clearer in where she wanted to go, better positioned, and was the one person who could get momentum to win for what I think I can fairly say the three of us broadly believe in.
But you wouldn't rule out standing in the future for the post if the ball came from the back of the scrum, I think the phrase is.
I'm not a very good rugby player, so I don't think I would ever be on the rugby field.
But you're going to stay in politics. You're not going to. I hear all these people who are going to leave the House of Commons when Boris goes. People like Nadine and Nigel Adams. I keep hearing they're going to other places. You're planning on staying in the.
Why would I leave?
House of, I hope you're going to stay. I just want to clarify that you're going to stay.
We had a lot of fun when I was on the back benches. I may be joining you again on Fridays to stop dreadful bills getting through.
You'll be very welcome.
Will Boris stay on as an MP?
I don't know. I haven't discussed it with him in any detail. That David Cameron went almost immediately, Tony Blair went absolutely immediately, Theresa May has stayed. It's a difficult decision to make, I think, because there's... Anything you say as a former PM who remains in Parliament is seen as being disagreeable, whereas if you don't say things, you're not representing your constituents. Boris has a very sunny character, and therefore maybe easier for him than it was, for example, for Ted Heath. But it is, as I said, it's a difficult choice. And I don't actually know what I would say to him if he asked for my view. I haven't come to a clear view as to what the right thing for him to do would be.
Because, you know, people would say he's going to come back, he's going to be like Churchill, he'll want to be Prime Minister again. Does he want to be Prime Minister again? Did he think at any time he would come back and be Prime Minister again?
Nobody's come back having lost the leadership of the party since Gladstone. And I just don't think in modern politics the chance of coming back is realistic. Lots of people think they're going to be called back by a grateful nation, which is why Harold Macmillan waited 20 years before accepting his peerage, because he thought even in very advanced old age, the country would finally say, Harold, we need you back. Things have got so bad. Life just isn't like that.
Just a couple of final questions. The Privileges Committee investigation into Boris, what do you think of that as a witch hunt? Do you think it's perfectly proper that they investigate him?
I think it's quite extraordinary that Harriet Harman, who I think is a very distinguished political figure, has not recused herself from it after the tweets that she put out accusing the Prime Minister of lying. I do not believe you can have a fair judgment when the chairman of the committee has already judged the matter. And I think she should stand down. I'm astonished that she accepted it, because she is, if I may put it this way, a good socialist. She's a very respectable individual. She's admired across party. And I think she's doing genuine damage to her reputation by putting herself in this position.
So it's not the committee inquiry that you have a problem with?
I think the committee inquiry is absurd. The Prime Minister has gone.
And the final question is, you said a while back that you thought that if there was a new Prime Minister, there should be a general election. Is that still your view? Was it ever your? I mean, did you just say that as a way to threaten people, don't get rid of Boris because you may face a general election? What's your view now on that?
When I first said it this year, people said exactly that to me. You're only saying it's a threat. And the great virtue of Hansard is that you can look up your old speeches. I actually made this point in 2011 when we were discussing the Fixed Term Parliament Act. And I was saying that the Fixed Term Parliament Act was a mistake because the Constitution was evolving to the point where a new Prime Minister would feel under a very strong pressure to have a new election, and that Gordon Brown had made a mistake in not doing it. The question now is, where are we in that evolution? Because I think that is unquestionably the evolution. I think the mandate Prime Ministers have is very personal. We are not a presidential system, but the mandate of a Prime Minister is personal. We all know that our personal vote in our own constituencies is small. However long we've been there, how much we get on with our constituents, just look at how Dominic Grieve and David Gauke did, respected long-serving MPs up against the party. People vote for the party, not the individual. And the party according to its leader as much as anything else. So I think the personal nature of the mandate, the general evolution of our constitution meant that prior to the Fixed Term Parliament Act, it was becoming almost inevitable. I think the Fixed Term Parliament Act has delayed that to some extent, but I think the pressure is unquestionably still there.
So if Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister within the next month, will you advise her to call a general election?
It's one of those decisions that is very much a personal one for any Prime Minister. I don't think it's one where Prime Ministers expect to get advice anymore. Interestingly, it was a cabinet decision until early 20th century. I'll have to look up precisely when. And it was thought right that the Prime Minister should discuss it with the cabinet. But by, I think, the 1920s, so maybe a little bit earlier, it's become very clearly a uniquely prime ministerial decision as to when to advise the monarch for a dissolution.
I know you work tirelessly. I know you're not even getting a summer holiday. So what do you do to relax?
I find politics so interesting that I don't think that being involved in politics is in that sense, it's not my nose to the grindstone. And I've got 6 children who keep me entertained and busy. Last night, once it got cool enough, I was playing cricket with Thomas, who's my 12-year-old son. So there's lots to do with the family.
No more, though. No more of it.
Helena has said that, no, I think her line is no more septicemia or octopus. So I think Sixtus is where we've drawn stumps, much so I would like to have the full cricket team. But there are all sorts of things to do beyond politics as well.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
So there you go. That was our interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Stopping at 6
Stopping
children,
at 6
no
children,
more.
Even though he wanted the full cricket team. I did ask him afterwards, actually, if the full cricket team included the 12-man as well, and he said he'd have been happy to go with that, but it was Helena, his wife, who decided 6 was enough. Anyway, your views have been coming in thick and fast about the interview. Sue says, no one has given Boris credit for his resilience. Don't get me wrong, Boris made mistakes, but I feel confident a lot of people would have crumbled facing the stresses he did. Theresa May, to name just one.
Barbara here. I don't believe Jacob has got his analysis of Liz Truss right. If she becomes PM, she'll delegate to her fawning supporters and take no blame for possibly losing the next general election. A decent and genuine person with good motives and a great brain, like Rishi, is preferable.
Abbas says, why so much criticism about Boris for lockdown? Why not pointing your fingers at Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland governments? They were more restrictive and harder on lockdown than Boris.
And Julia, how I wish Jacob Rees-Mogg was our Prime Minister. Such a shame he didn't stand this time, as he would do a tremendous job for our country and give the Labour Party a bashing.
And John says, Jacob Rees-Mogg speaks more sense than everyone else in Parliament. Jacob for Prime Minister and Boris is Deputy. That'll put Starmer to bed.
And Les, Boris Johnson is to millions our Boris. Regardless of the schemers and the faceless backstabbers he gave us Brexit, he will always be our Boris. Well, that's it from us today, but we'll be back next Saturday from 10 a.m.
Don't go anywhere, though, because now it's Alistair Stewart and friends. And didn't Alistair do a fantastic job with that interview with Liz Truss earlier in the week? So he's on afterwards, so stick with us.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. More hot sunshine to come this weekend for the vast majority. 35 Celsius or even 36 degrees as temperatures peak this afternoon. But later Sunday, and more especially into the start of the week, a thundery breakdown follows. For the time being, high pressure is in control. That's keeping clouds away. It's keeping many places in the sunshine. Not everyone, though. There is